The restaurant glowed like something out of a dream, soft. Candlelight flickered across crystal glasses, and the quiet murmur of elegant voices filled the air. Emma sat at the corner table, her palms damp against her lap, heart fluttering like a trapped bird. She had promised herself she'd be calm tonight, that she wouldn't ruin her first date in years with nerves. But all that confidence melted the moment she looked across the table, because sitting there wasn't just her reflection in polished glass. It was her 6-year-old daughter, Lily, swinging her little legs under the chair, humming softly as she colored on the menu with a crayon she'd found in Emma's purse. Emma had begged her babysitter not to cancel last minute. But when the call came, her son was sick. There had been no choice. Either bring Lily or cancel. And how could she cancel now, after her best friend had spent weeks convincing her to take this chance? Emma checked the clock for the 5th time. Her date was late, of course. Maybe it was fate, she told herself bitterly. Maybe this was the universe reminding her that single mothers didn't get fairy tales, just early bedtimes and unpaid bills. She reached for her purse to signal the waiter when a tall shadow moved across the floor. She looked up and her breath caught. The man who had just walked in seemed almost unreal. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a charcoal suit that fit too perfectly to be casual. His dark hair gleamed under the chandelier, and his eyes swept the room with quiet authority. Alexander Reed. The name echoed in her mind like a whisper from another world. The billionaire entrepreneur her friend had set her up with. She had Googled him once just to be sure he was real. He was, painfully so. And now he was walking toward her table. Emma stood quickly, almost knocking her glass over. "Mr. Reed, I'm so sorry," she stammered. "Something came up and I couldn't find a babysitter. If you'd rather reschedule, I completely understand." But he didn't let her finish. He looked down at Lily, who was watching him with big, curious eyes. Then he smiled, slow and warm, and crouched to the child's level. "And who might this be?" Lily blinked, startled but not afraid. "I'm Lily," she said softly. "That's a beautiful name," he said. "It suits you." Dinner unfolded in a way Emma hadn't dared to imagine. Instead of awkward silences or tight smiles, the table buzzed with soft laughter and warmth that she hadn't felt in years. Alexander wasn't what she expected at all. He wasn't cold or distracted, like the men she'd met before. He didn't glance at his watch, didn't flinch every time Lily interrupted. Instead, he leaned forward, listening as if every childish word mattered. When the waiter brought the menu, Lily giggled at the long names she couldn't pronounce. "Mommy, what's tagliata di manzo?" she whispered. Before Emma could answer, Alexander chuckled. "That's fancy grown-up talk for steak," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "But the fries are the real reason we order." Lily laughed so hard she nearly dropped her crayon, and Emma couldn't help but smile, even as her chest tightened with something that felt dangerously close to hope. She kept stealing glances at him, at the way his eyes softened when he looked at her daughter, at the ease in his posture, like he wasn't just tolerating the situation but enjoying it. Every time Lily spoke, he listened. When she spilled a bit of juice on the table, Emma reached for napkins, mortified. But Alexander was faster. "No harm done," he said gently, dabbing the spill with his handkerchief before handing it to Lily like it was no big deal. The gesture made Emma's throat tighten. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't performing for her. He was simply kind. Between courses, the conversation shifted. "So you're an artist?" Alexander asked, nodding at the pile of napkins covered in colorful stick figures. Lily grinned. "I draw Mommy and me. Sometimes our cat, but he never sits still." Alexander smiled. "That's a very lucky cat." Then, turning to Emma, he said quietly, "She's a lot like you know." Bright eyes. Brave smile. Emma's cheeks warmed. Compliments weren't new to her. But this one didn't feel like flattery, it felt like truth. For the first time that evening, she let herself laugh freely. They spoke about simple things. Lily's favorite bedtime story, Emma's disastrous attempts at baking, Alexander's childhood dream of owning a dog he never got. He confessed he hadn't sat down for a meal like this in years. Not with laughter. Not with warmth. "It's strange," he said, his voice thoughtful, "how something so ordinary can feel extraordinary." Emma met his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. As dessert arrived, Lily leaned on the table, sleepy but content. "You're funny," she mumbled to Alexander, yawning. "Mommy doesn't laugh like this at home." Emma's breath caught, and she opened her mouth to shush her, but Alexander only smiled. Then maybe I should try to make her laugh more often. The night air felt gentler than usual, carrying the faint scent of rain and streetlights glowing like melted gold. Emma held Lily close, her small head resting against her shoulder, her breaths deep and even, already half asleep. Alexander walked beside them, hands tucked in his pockets, his stride unhurried. For a man who lived in headlines and boardrooms, he seemed strangely at peace just walking down a quiet street with a woman and her sleeping child. The rhythmic click of their shoes on the pavement filled the spaces between their words, and somehow that silence felt comfortable, safe even. Emma kept her eyes on the path, still unsure how to act around him outside the restaurant. You really didn't have to do this, she murmured. It's late. You probably have a dozen meetings tomorrow. He shrugged lightly. They can wait. His tone was calm, certain. This felt more important. Emma looked up at him, surprised by his sincerity. You don't even know us, she said softly. We met 2 hours ago. He turned his head slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting. Sometimes 2 hours tells you more than 2 years. They reached a narrow bridge that crossed a small river, glimmering under the streetlights. Emma paused there, the wind brushing through her hair. Lily stirred in her arms but didn't wake. For a moment the world felt still. Alexander leaned against the railing, glancing out at the reflection of the lights in the dark water. You love her a lot, he said quietly. I could see it from the moment you walked in. Emma laughed softly, though it came out more like a sigh. She's my everything, sometimes too much of everything. I think that's why most men run when they realize it. He turned to her, his gaze steady. Then they didn't deserve to meet her or you. The words hit her harder than she expected. No one had ever said them like that, without pity, without hesitation. Just truth. She blinked fast, pretending to adjust Lily's blanket. You make it sound simple, she said, trying to steady her voice. It is simple, he replied. Love isn't about trimming yourself down so someone else will stay. She's part of you. If I can't accept her, then I don't deserve you. Emma stared at him, the air caught in her lungs. The sincerity in his tone left no space for doubt. No man had ever spoken to her like that. Not since Lily's father left. Not since the world started labeling her as too complicated. For a heartbeat, she forgot the noise of the city, the weight of her worries. There was only him and that quiet truth between them. When they reached her apartment building, she hesitated by the entrance. The yellow porch light flickered above the worn-out door. Thank you for tonight, she said, finally, voice low. For not making me feel out of place. Alexander smiled. I should be thanking you. You reminded me what real looks like. He crouched down then, careful not to wake Lily, and whispered, Take care of your mom, all right? Days turned into weeks, and somehow, Alexander kept finding reasons to see them again. Sometimes it was a casual coffee near Emma's workplace. Other times it was a visit to the park where Lily loved to feed the ducks. He never came empty-handed. Sometimes it was a small sketchbook for Lily. Sometimes fresh flowers for Emma. Always thoughtful, never extravagant. What surprised her most was his effort. He didn't just talk to her. He made space for Lily in every plan, every moment. When Emma apologized once for her daughter tagging along again, he simply smiled and said, Why would I want to see you without half your heart? That sentence alone made something inside her melt. Lily adored him. She'd light up the moment his name was mentioned, racing to the window whenever Emma's phone buzzed. One afternoon they all went to an art exhibit for children. While Emma admired the paintings, Alexander crouched beside Lily, helping her mix colors at a workshop table. Paint stained his expensive cuffs, but he didn't care. You're better at this than I am, he told her, pretending to pout. Maybe you can teach me sometime. Emma watched from a few feet away, warmth blooming in her chest at the sight of her daughter laughing freely again. It had been so long since Lily had someone patient enough to listen to her stories. That evening, the three of them stopped for ice cream near the park. The sunset painted the sky pink and gold, and the air smelled faintly of summer. Lily sat between them, swinging her legs, happily smearing chocolate on her chin. When she ran off to chase pigeons, Emma turned to Alexander, her voice quiet. You don't have to keep doing this, she said. You've already done more than enough. He looked at her for a long moment. Emma, he said softly, I'm not doing this out of kindness. I'm doing it because it feels right. I've spent my whole life around people who only talk about numbers and deals. But with you, his voice dropped. I remember what it's like to actually live. She stared at him, her breath catching. I'm not used to people saying things like that, she admitted. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. Then get used to it, he murmured. Because I'm not going anywhere. Lily ran back then, breathless and laughing. Holding a flower she'd picked from the grass, she placed it in Alexander's hand. It's for you, she said. He smiled, tucking it carefully into his jacket pocket. Emma watched them, her heart aching in the best possible way. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of it. Because somehow, without realizing when or how, this man had become part of their little world. And she couldn't imagine it without him anymore. Months later, the restaurant looked almost the same as that first night. The same golden light, the same polished tables, the same quiet hum of conversations, but everything inside Emma felt different. She wasn't the same woman who had sat here clutching her purse and fearing judgment. She sat now with her head held high, a soft smile on her lips, and her daughter beside her, her little Lily, now wearing a white dress with ribbons, her laughter filling the air like music. Alexander sat across from them, looking at her the way he always did, with that calm intensity that made her forget the rest of the world. He'd invited them both to dinner, saying only, I want to celebrate something. She didn't ask what. With him, surprises had become something she no longer feared. Dinner passed in easy conversation and bursts of laughter. Lily showed him her new drawings, now more colorful and confident than before, and he admired each one, as if they were masterpieces. Emma watched them, her heart full. She remembered every step that had brought them here. The nervous first meeting, the walks home, the quiet talks at sunset. She remembered the fear that used to live in her chest, that voice whispering she would never be enough, that no one would ever choose her and her child. But Alexander had silenced that voice without even trying. He had stayed through every messy, imperfect, beautiful moment. When dessert arrived, Lily gasped at the sight of the chocolate mousse glistening in front of her. But Emma's eyes caught on something else, a glint of silver nestled in the cream. For a moment she thought it was a trick of the light. Then her breath stopped, a ring. Elegant, simple, but shimmering with quiet promise. Her fingers trembled as she looked up at him. Alexander rose slowly, walking to her side. The restaurant seemed to fade into silence, every sound dimming until all she could hear was her heartbeat. He took her hand, steady and sure. Emma, he said softly, you once told me you were afraid your daughter would scare someone away. But she didn't scare me. She showed me what love really looks like. You both did. You gave me a family when I didn't even know I needed one. Lily clapped her hands, eyes wide with delight. Are you asking Mommy to marry you? She squealed. Alexander chuckled, kneeling down so he was level with her. Only if you'll be my flower girl. The little girl nodded eagerly, and Emma's tears finally fell. She laughed through them, covering her mouth, and then whispered, Yes. The restaurant broke into quiet applause as Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her hand. Lily threw her arms around them both, giggling.